"You can be in our family if you want," the little girl said, as if offering him a chair he had never known how to ask for. And in that 2-second hush the city's noise stuttered, and the lonely CEO on the park bench felt the world tilt towards something he had not had in years, the possibility of being wanted. Daniel walked home with the taste of garlic in his hair and an ache in a place that had been anesthetized for so long. He could not stop thinking about the way Rosa's eyes lit up when they talked about a scholarship opportunity for Maya at the neighborhood school, about how Luis dreamt of becoming a mechanic, about the way community had turned scarcity into abundance. He had been drowning in wealth that felt irrelevant. Here was generosity that wanted nothing in return but to be shared. By the end of the week, Daniel found himself doing small things. He bought groceries without announcing it, fixed a leaking faucet in their bathroom one evening with clumsy hands that used to sign million-dollar contracts, and in quiet moments offered advice to Rosa about job postings. Each act felt like a chisel prying at a plaque of guilt, a slow reclaiming of something human. Maya's eyes lit up when she showed him a drawing of a family, stick figures holding hands, and she pointed to a spot, saying cheerfully, "That's where you sit." Daniel laughed each time, not because it was funny but because it was easier than saying he had never known where he fit. Still, his life above ground, in glass towers and luminous screens, continued to press down. He kept his involvement a secret from colleagues who knew him as a movable mountain. He was their fortress. Yet, as he walked the city each evening, he found himself returning to the park bench, to Maya's quick questions, and to the warmth that cost nothing and gave everything. A small act, he discovered, could tilt the axis of days. Maya's invitation, absurd, sincere, and offered without the heavy calculation of resale value, lodged in his chest like a promise. He promised himself, silently, that he would not be the kind of person who let such offers evaporate. He did not yet understand how much his presence would change the people around him, and how their presence would change him. Only that the world had quietly begun to offer him another place at the table. Months passed, and the bench became a crossroads of change. Daniel's small acts began to accumulate like stones stacked to form a bridge. He used his access to help Rosa enroll in a vocational program that ran evening classes. He arranged a modest grant through a foundation the company sponsored, quietly redirecting funds earmarked for a glossy ad campaign toward a community center in the neighborhood. The center smelled of paint and hope the day it opened. Children scampered over floors that once held unemployment flyers and broken furniture. Maya found a place to practice piano. Luis found a mentor who lent him tools and taught him how to fix a carburetor. Daniel, who once multiplied profits and subtracted human cost without blinking, now watched as numbers translated into playground paint and hot meals. Something else changed in him. Where his grief had been a closed fist, compassion softened his fingers. His daughter Claire noticed the difference long before they spoke. There was a lightness when he visited her at university, a less brittle tone when he tried to apologize in words that felt clumsy but real. They started writing letters at first, then met for coffee where non-judgmental conversation began to stitch their distance. He showed her photographs of Maya's drawings. She showed him a piece of student art she had been too shy to hang on a dorm wall. Little by little, the house that had been an echo began to host dinners again. They were small, awkward, and honest. Then life did what it often does in tales of second chances. It tested the new muscles of the heart by breaking what had been rebuilt. A hostile takeover, fueled by a rival who tempted board members with promises of shiny returns, unseated Daniel. Accusations flew about misallocated funds, the same redirection of advertising money to the center, recast as a sign of fiscal negligence. Lawyers murmured about ethics. Investors called for a quick transition. One morning, Daniel was escorted past his own office by security, his name whispered like a rumor. He left with a box of framed certificates and a heart that felt like a business card with corners worn off. There was an expectation that once the finances were gone, so would any attachment he had made. The formula of his life, give up the title and be devoured by loneliness, had always seemed inevitable. But something Maya had taught him, that families are not only blood or contract, but those who choose you again and again, refuse to let that happen. When the eviction notices began to pile up for people in the neighborhood because the new property developer intended to raise a row of homes, Rosa convened a meeting in the community center. Volunteers were plenty, but money was not. Word spread to neighbors, to parents, to a woman who once worked in Daniel's company whose son had benefited from the center, to students who used it for art. They fundraised not with glossy brochures, but with potlucks and bake sales and a donation box that traveled from hand to hand. Maya sold bouquets on busy Saturdays. Luis organized a car wash. Claire painted a mural and posted images online. The small acts of many created a tide. The unexpected, gentle full circle arrived on an ordinary afternoon when Daniel, who had been staying in a spare room at Rose's because his own house had been quietly emptied by bank movers, sat on the community center steps licking a paper cup of coffee. A man who had once been his rival in a boardroom strategy called unexpectedly, not to gloat, but to apologize after seeing footage of the community rally. In the end, what saved the row of homes was not legal posturing, but human attention. Letters from neighbors, petitions signed by Claire and her classmates, and a public outcry fueled by a photo of Maya, holding a sign that said, "People are more than land." The developer relented, partly because public pressure made demolition a mess and partly because no one wanted to be the person who leveled a community for profit. The bank granted a short reprieve. Donors came forward offering to buy out a lot that became a permanent community park. Daniel, who had spent decades measuring life by quarterly returns, learned that the returns that mattered were different: laughter-filled rooms, a child's hand on your finger, the way a meal was shared when someone had nothing else. He found a new purpose in the work of repair, not of balance sheets, but of lives. He helped the center grow into a place where people could learn trades, take night classes, and get hot meals. He and Claire ran a scholarship program. Luis was accepted into a vocational school and later apprenticed at a local garage. Rosa secured a steady job and learned to budget a way out of constant worry. And Maya? She grew into someone who could, with a wink, still offer chairs to strangers. One evening, years later, Daniel sat on that same bench where the story had first bent toward hope. He watched Maya, older now, a little taller, run across the grass toward a child who had dropped her balloon. She waved, and the child's mother looked relieved before smiling at Daniel. Kindness had started as a sandwich shared and a seat offered. It had been a ripple that reached back like a tide to save him when storms came. In the quiet that settled around the park bench, Daniel felt a deep gratitude, not for what he had lost or once possessed, but for what he had found, the family who had chosen him, and the truth that empathy could change destiny if only someone dared to act. Moral of the story: a single, sincere act of kindness can open a place at the table for someone who thought they had no seat, and, in time, transform both giver and receiver into a family that sustains them all.